Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Earlier this month, residents in a high-rise Manhattan building experienced a life-threatening fire, injuring over 30 people. The cause of this fire stemmed from an electronic bike. According to the FDNY, there's been around 200 related fires in New York City this year alone. Joining me to discuss the rising threat of e-bikes is auto reporter for Consumer Reports, Benjamin Preston. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, as I mentioned, a lot of these fires are stemming from e-bikes, but this isn't the first time. Why is this now becoming a common occurrence?
Well, e-bike sales have been rising pretty steadily over the years, and within the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, they really skyrocketed. I talked to some manufacturer groups and some bike shop people, and the story that they're telling is that some of the older bikes that might need new batteries, those are the ones that are going to be the most subject to fires. The brand new bikes that come from a factory with quality controls are far, 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 far less likely to catch on fire. And the FDNY has even put out a list of recommendations of how to prevent these fires. And they really have a lot to do with what kind of batteries you're using, how you're charging the bikes, and that kind of thing, where you're storing them. And there are a number of ways that you can avoid this sort of thing. And I think that, in the city where you see a lot of older bikes, you get a lot of delivery riders that ride them. They've been riding e-bikes for years now, like well over a decade, probably 2 decades. And, the batteries wear out after a while, and it's really easy to just go on Amazon and buy the cheapest battery possible, but it's probably not the best option.
I'm so glad that you're bringing up the batteries because that is seemingly the real culprit. So it's not the e-bike itself, it's really the lithium-ion batteries. But so many household items rely on these types of batteries. Should people be worried just in general if they are using any appliances or anything that uses those types of batteries?
Generally, no. The batteries that come with products are thoroughly tested and they go through quality control. And if it's an approved product, it shouldn't catch on fire. I mean, obviously, if a battery gets damaged and if it gets crushed or something like that, or gets heated up by some other heat source, if it's involved in an unrelated fire, that can be a problem. But generally, people don't have problems with it. If you remember, years back, there was that issue with the Samsung phones where there was a quality control issue with the lithium-ion battery in the phone, and some of them were catching on fire, so they recalled it. But you haven't heard anything about that in quite some time because people generally don't replace the batteries on their smartphones. So you're not seeing aftermarket battery explosions or anything like that.
Okay, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I actually do remember that being a thing, and nobody was ever afraid to like buy a phone. So, do you think that the same thing should apply to the e-bike? Like, should people be afraid of like buying these e-bikes?
I don't think people should be afraid of buying e-bikes. No, I think that people should be very careful if they have to replace a lithium-ion battery, regardless of the product that it's in, that they're getting the highest quality product they can get. It's basically one of those deals where if you can't afford to buy the manufacturer part, you probably should just maybe not get another battery because some of the aftermarket batteries are just poor quality, and if the electronics inside go bad or the cells are of inferior quality or whatever, that's the thing that can cause a fire, and the FDNY has said that.
So I'm really glad that you brought up the term aftermarket batteries. This is the first time that I'm ever hearing something like that. Can you just explain what they are and why we should stay away from them?
Sure. As someone who tinkers around with things a lot, I buy a lot of things on Amazon or eBay or whatever, and you can get a lot of parts that come directly from a factory overseas. And when a manufacturer builds a product and it has a battery in it, they're going to have control over the manufacturing process of the battery that goes into their product. So there's going to be a standard that has to be met when that product comes out. Whereas if you buy the cheapest thing off of Amazon that's coming direct to you from a factory that the manufacturer might not have a relationship with, or maybe they're just direct to consumer, you never know what you're going to get, and that's a problem. I'm a volunteer firefighter out here on Long Island, and I went to a lithium-ion battery seminar, and they talked about this. And one of the big things was, when you're getting lithium-ion batteries, scale is a big thing, because if you get an aftermarket battery that has some kind of problem, that catches on fire, well, you could look online and see a video of a phone catching on fire and blowing out the windshield of a car. Whereas a larger battery in a bicycle, as you've seen, can cause a much larger fire.
Now, are there any warnings or alerts to customers about the possibility, of fire or an explosion, like when they do buy these types of products, specifically an e-bike?
There generally aren't warnings when you buy an e-bike, because typically it's not a problem. The fire department definitely advises that you don't store them in an area that could block ingress and egress of a building. And you see that a lot in New York City, where people have their e-bikes parked inside. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation, because you have to charge it somewhere, but keeping it inside is not a great idea, because if something happens with the battery while it's charging, it could be a real life-threatening situation for a lot of people.
So I'm really interested in the fact that you said like keeping it inside isn't a great idea. Apparently, a lot of landlords and even NYCHA buildings are considering banning e-bikes from being used or just being inside of the apartment. What are your thoughts on that, and what tips should people follow in regard to that?
I think that people need to be aware, first of all, of the aftermarket battery replacement issue, which is a big deal. Make sure you're getting a quality replacement if you have to replace the battery. Charging the bike inside is not a great idea, because if something happens and it catches on fire, well, you're stuck inside with it. I think a lot of people keep them in entry hallways, which there's a reason why New York City landlords generally don't allow bicycles, strollers, other things to be piled in the front entryway, because if there is a fire of any type, then it makes it more difficult for people to get in and out. And that's certainly true with e-bikes as well.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier, a lot of people who use these e-bikes are New Yorkers who are delivering food. This is kind of a part of their livelihood, so it's not just for leisure. Do you think it's the right approach to kind of step away from having them in buildings, or, NYCHA places banning them? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there are people who study that sort of thing who can speak more authoritatively on it. I think that there's definitely a conflict there, between the people who need to charge their bicycle somewhere because they're using it for work, and the need to keep entry halls clear and probably just not have e-bikes inside of an apartment. If you think about the logistics of where you could plug it in, though, that could get pretty tricky, because if you chain it to the wrought iron fence out in front of the stoop, you're gonna drape a cord out the window. I don't know. That's probably not safe either. So there are some challenges that need to be sort of studied by the city and by other municipalities to sort of figure this thing out, because I think that people are finding out that this is a good way to maintain mobility without using a car, and it's a good way to sort of like, you could look at it like a last mile kind of thing, because delivery workers can definitely use these to great effect without using so many resources, and it's
Right.
more cost effective.
Now, city officials are considering new laws after the fire department counted nearly 200 related incidents. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Well, I think that there have definitely been an increase in fires in the city, but again, there are more bicycles, and because those delivery riders and everything else. I mean, if you're looking at these pictures that the FDMY has shown, you're seeing older models and kind of bikes that look a lot like scooters that have been around for a while. And so, like I said, they're going to have to replace the batteries on these after a while because over time they lose capacity. And if that person who's working and probably riding a lot to make deliveries every day, for hours every day, they're going to have to replace that battery at some point. It would probably be a good idea for regulators to look at that and say there has to be some kind of regulation kind of centered around where people are getting their batteries so they're not buying inferior or unsafe products.
Now, can you just let everybody know how they can ensure they're using bikes that are safe and certified?
Well, the larger manufacturers tend to have a more tested product. So, the bigger name companies are going to have something it's probably known to work. Smaller companies have stuff too. I mean, it's really, you just have to do your research online and see what's available and see who has the best reviews on their product. Look for recalls, if there are any kind of safety recalls on products, it'd be better to sort of steer clear of those things.
All right, perfect. So, can you just let everybody know how they can stay up to date with you and your organization?
Sure. Check us out at cr.org, cr.org, and we have some information on how to prevent e-bike fires, how to find the best e-bikes, and all that sort of thing.
All right, Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.